Coming up on today's episode, good evening YouTube, here with you again at the bench. What you see in front of you is the new radio board, TRF board that I alluded to in my flap. So that is what I've got sitting here. There's 4 or 5 of them. I think 5 of them. Also, these are the parts that will populate the board. I'm going to flash up the schematic and BOM for it, and that's the one we're building there, as you can see now on the screen, I believe. And for the L1 and L2 coupling and you know, all that stuff, that's just a standard transistor. It's not this one, but it's one just exactly like it. You know, and the same with the cap. They're just a standard 6140 VCAP, and that's all we're doing with that. Now that doesn't match the original, but you know, you have to kind of keep in mind that the original used different windings on the antenna, and it was matched to the VCAP that they used, which was I think a 384 picofarad, and I don't know what the inductance was of the coils they wound, but we're using just a standard. In other words, it doesn't really matter how you get there, whether you change the capacitor to match the antenna coil or go the other way. It doesn't really matter, but as long as you're tuning the right range, and that's what we're doing, that should work just fine, and that's our plan anyway. Of course, now we won't be using the 60 picofarad section of the standard VCAP, which is the oscillator for super heterodyne radios, and won't be using that part of it, but the rest of everything else is pretty much the same as the Magnavox that I just showed you. That was, you know, it's pretty much the same. It works the same way, except for the only difference is where it inputs. It's inputting to the RF amp, and there's no oscillator with it because it's TRF. So that's really the only difference. That's why the 60 picofarad section is not used, because we don't have an oscillator. So like I say, that's the way it's going to be working, I do believe. And like I said, I'm going to do this in the morning when I'm fresh, because I like to do it when I'm fresh, and I'll populate the board, and we'll go from there. But I think and we're hoping this works, obviously. But again, that's just if it works, we may do some tweaking to it. And for one thing, it doesn't have a volume control, and I don't know. I just kind of like to have a volume control. I mentioned that to Bob, and he seemed to think you tune it off frequency to turn it down, which I understand that, but you know, at the same time, I don't really care to do it that way. So that's just me and versus him, I guess. But anywho, excuse me. That's what's going on here, and I have a lot of other projects like this I want to do. That Ronald Kwan, I believe was his name, book with the building a transistor radio. He does a lot of these kind of things in there, TRFs and reflex, and then he does the super heterodyne. Now the super heterodyne, you may recall that the AM super het radio receiver that I did some time ago was based on that. His actual drawings and things were just a hair different, so I'm going to try to follow his if I can when I revisit that I should say. But that's on down the line, and like I say, for now I want to build this little gem here that Bob has whipped up in KiCad, and see how it performs. Hopefully good, and if it does, we will go from there. So join me for that. Welcome back once again, YouTube. I am at this again. I do have all of the resistors soldered onto the board now. Next I'll do the capacitors. No certain order, I guess these have to be done. This is just the way I do it. And I had to do some surgery on my soldering iron tip. After all this time, it finally has succumbed to wear, and I had to ground it down a little bit to make a more suitable tip to get these soldered on. They basically just did not have, I just couldn't get the tip of the soldering iron into the joint there between the wire and the solder pad to make a good connection. So I've got that all whittled down now, and I think it should be fine. But I thought I'd bring you back and show you this, that it is in fact soldered there. There's the other side of it. And again, like I say, I'm going to do the capacitors next. I got one there, one there, one there. And then I think there's 4 of the 10 nanofarads. They go on there various places. There's one right there. So that's basically what I'm going to do. Then I'll do lastly I'll do the transistors. They go here, 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 and here. There's 5 of them. All 4 of them are the same transistor, 2N3904s, and then one is a 2N3906. I think it's right there. So there you go. That's a look at that. Now, last thing I'm going to do is do the loop stick and the B cap. B cap goes here. Loop stick goes here. Now, the loop stick I have is one from a transistor radio. It does have similar, as I said before, to the AM80 Magnavox that I showed you, where it's basically the antenna coil, which is, I think, 680 microhenries, and then there's a loop of wire basically loosely coupled to that. I say loosely, it's actually wound pretty tight around the coil, but it basically is how the circuit itself is fed from the antenna core. Now, the antenna coil itself goes to the V-cap for the tuning, and that is how it is tuned. And like I say, and then it fed to the circuitry, the RF amp or whatever you want to call it there, from the other coupled coupling, whatever. But it just basically, inductively takes it from the antenna coil, the tuned antenna coil, and goes that way. So I did order some additional coils, or antenna coils, loop sticks, whatever you want to call them, from Mike's this morning, and those are going to be used in with this to see if we can't get the best function out of this. Now, normally these V-caps on transistor radios have, again, 2 sections, 2 gangs, a 140 picofarad section and a 60 picofarad section. That the 140 is the antenna coil, I should say, and the 60 is the oscillator coil. Now, those actually can be combined for a 200 picofarad variable cap, and if you do that, I think the inductance of the antenna coil then needs to be 470 microhenries. And we may do some experiments. I've got a couple of them, like I say, a couple different styles coming, and the one that I think is going to work for this is it's got a 680 and with a 470 tap. Now, I'm thinking the actual point between the where the 470 begins and the other end of the 680 is the one we want to use for our coupling here, and I think that'll work. I don't know for sure, but I think it will work. So that's one of the reasons I got it to experiment with. So we'll see how it works, and then we'll get back to it. All right, let me get the, like I say, there's another one of the 10s. Let me get back to the soldering the caps in, and then we'll do the transistors, and then we'll be pretty much ready to get these loop sticks and these V-cap soldered in and test this baby. So that'll be exciting, don't you think? Alright, well, as you can see, I do have the board complete now, except for the loop stick and the V-cap. And, of course, the speaker. I don't know what I'm going to use for a speaker yet, or how I'm going to do that, but we'll see. Like I say, got the caps all in. All the transistors are in, even the odd one, which is the 2N3906 here. The rest of them are 2N3904s, as I said before. And there you go. That's a look at that. So, again, next thing up on the agenda is to add the V-cap and the loop stick. I'll have to do some testing to make sure I've got the correct ones for the ones that I need to add, as far as which one's the antenna coil and which one's the the coupling coil. And on the V-cap, I think it's the one on the left, as Bob says, but you know, it depends on how you're looking at it. I think. So we'll look at that and see. But again, there you go. That's pretty getting there as far as most of the soldering is done now. So that's a pretty good thing, I think. So there you go. Alright, well, it does work, as you can hear. Not the loudest thing in the world. Guess that depends on where you're at in relation to the station and how many watts it's putting out, things like that. But it does work, which was a positive step, I would think. I haven't really played with too many things here. Kind of hard to tune this every time you touch it. I think even with a knob it would do that. But it does work, like I said. That's a step in the right direction. And we're glad of that. So, there you go. Like I say, this is an old, and I say old, I don't know how old it is, but it's an old transistor radio. I'll get you down here so you can see it. The loop stick and the V-cap are both from an old transistor radio. You can see, I don't know how we can see it, but I've marked 140 on this side, because that's this side of the capacitor, and the other side's the oscillator, 60. It took me a little while to figure out the wiring of the loop stick, because I thought it would be these two. Yeah, that's the local station. I just now heard the ID. But anyway, I thought it would be the two outside ones here, the beige color ones, and then the black and the red maybe. But apparently it's the black, and there's some red tint to this, I believe, and there's black on this one here. So I guess that's the two things. But anyway, these two here on this black one, and this one with the black, is the antenna coil itself, and these are the loop or coupling type section of the loop stick. So again, not much volume, but again, I haven't done much else to it. I have made sure all the connections are good. Seem to be. And that is a 9-volt battery. I mean, I measured to make sure it was 9 volts. So, that should be good. Really need me a knob on that, but that's about the best I can do, I guess. They said this was room filling volume. I don't think that's room filling volume. Somehow. But it does work, and like I said, that's the main thing. I want to make sure it worked before I try to invest any more into it. And like I say, it's not on the station, I can tell that. But it's close. I just need a better way of tuning this thing. Of course, the orientation of the loop stick has a lot to do with it also. So, that's going to do this one, I think. I will try to work on perfecting this a little bit better, and I'll have some talks with Bob, see what he thinks about it, and we'll go from there. So, all right.